Today in Real Life Archives, John Leonard versus Pepsi.
Listen, what we are about to unpack today, it is not just some quirky footnote in marketing history. I want you to really settle in for this one because this is a profound, almost unbelievable story about corporate hubris, extreme consumer ambition, and a multi-million-dollar legal standoff that literally fundamentally changed the entire advertising industry. We are going to look closely at a moment when the hyper-competitive landscape of American consumerism collided head-on with the rigid, unforgiving walls of contract law. Let's dissect exactly how a 21-year-old college student looked at a massive global corporation and called the ultimate bluff. $32 million. I want you to just take a moment and let that number really sink in, because that was the estimated value of a military-grade AV-8B Harrier II jump jet back in the mid-1990s. We're not talking about a toy here. This is a formidable, highly classified piece of military hardware. An aircraft actively utilized by the United States Marine Corps, completely renowned for its ability to take off and land vertically. Now, I want you to imagine a corporate giant, a soda company, offering this ultimate weapon of war to anyone willing to drink enough of their product. It sounds entirely impossible, doesn't it? Like a fever dream? But to truly understand how this astronomical figure became the absolute center of a bitter, dragged-out lawsuit, we have to look at the environment that actually birthed it. Section 1. The Cola Wars escalate. So picture the mid-1990s. PepsiCo was locked in this fierce, incredibly high-stakes battle to erode the market share of its primary rival, Coca-Cola. It was an all-out war. To win it, Pepsi positioned itself as the definitive choice for the younger, more adventurous, rebellious demographic. They famously branded them the Pepsi generation. This was an era of just fiercely aggressive marketing. We're talking high production value television commercials, massive celebrity endorsements, and huge dramatic imagery. And this quote right here, this brilliantly illustrates their ultimate weapon in that war. The 1995 Pepsi Stuff campaign. This was the core promise. Customers were essentially encouraged to mass purchase cans and bottles of Pepsi just to accumulate points from the labels. You could then take those points and redeem them for branded merchandise out of a catalog. It was honestly a masterclass in incentivized mass consumption. You drink the soda, you cut out the physical tag, you get the gear, and you broadcast to the whole world that you are a proud part of the Pepsi generation. But Pepsi needed a commercial that would completely cut through the noise of the 90s. They needed something totally unforgettable. And that leads us to the sheer absurdity of this commercial's final offer. It is just staggering when you look back at it. The television spot opened on this idyllic, quiet suburban morning. A teenager, sporting a Pepsi t-shirt that costs 75 points, struts down the hall. He puts on a leather jacket for 1,450 points and some sunglasses for 175 points. Then, the music swells. The extreme, violent winds of a descending aircraft create an absolute maelstrom in a high school physics classroom. Papers are flying everywhere. A literal Harrier jet lands right next to the bicycle rack. The teenager pops open the cockpit, holds up a Pepsi, and says, "Sure beats the bus." Then, the screen flashes the ultimate prize. Harrier Fighter, 7 million Pepsi points. This was broadcast to tens of millions of people worldwide, and crucially, and this is the absolute crux of the whole story, there was not a single legal disclaimer on the screen. No just kidding, no terms and conditions apply. It was just presented as a straight, legitimate offer. Section 2. Discovering the loophole. Now, while all the highly paid Pepsi executives just assumed the 7 million point price tag was a hilarious joke, a 21-year-old business student named John Leonard saw something else entirely. He saw a mathematical vulnerability. Leonard was exactly the demographic Pepsi was actively targeting. He was young, he was adventurous, and he was highly ambitious. So he decided to do something unprecedented. He decided to take Pepsi at its exact literal word. But look, even he knew that physically buying and drinking 16.8 million cans of soda was both a physical and financial impossibility. He couldn't do it. He needed a different way in. And this 10-cent figure right here, this is the key to the whole kingdom. Leonard combed through the rules and noticed some very, very fine print in the Pepsi Stuff catalog. It turned out consumers didn't actually need to drink millions of Pepsis. The printed rules explicitly stated that you only needed to submit a minimum of 15 physical Pepsi tags. If you were short on points for the item you wanted, well, you could just purchase the remaining points directly from Pepsi for 10 cents each. Just like that, suddenly, the impossible, towering mountain of soda cans completely vanished, replaced by a very clear, very stark financial equation. So just do the math with me for a second. 7 million points at 10 cents a point equals exactly $700,000. John Leonard sat there and realized he could legally acquire a $32 million combat aircraft for literal pennies on the dollar. It was, without a doubt, the bargain of the century. So Leonard got to work. He hit the phones. He methodically pitched his incredible discovery. And he actually managed to convince 5 well-off investors, including an automobile dealership owner named Todd Hoffman, to back him. Together, they pooled their resources and raised the exact funds needed to execute this incredible loophole. The trap was set. Section 3. The demand and rejection. So here is what happens next. Leonard carefully fills out the official Pepsi stuff order form. Now, because a military jet naturally wasn't actually listed on the printed mail-in form, he manually wrote it in as an item. He gathered his required 15 physical Pepsi Points, and backed by his investors, he acquired a certified check for exactly $700,008.50. That covered the remaining points, plus the required shipping and handling. He placed it all in an envelope, sent it off to Pepsi's fulfillment house, and effectively called a multi-billion-dollar corporation's bluff. He was ready for his jet. Well, on May 7th, 1996, Pepsi's official response finally arrived. And it was a categorical, almost scoffing dismissal. They immediately returned his check. They explicitly stated that the commercial was a joke, that the jet was purely fanciful, and that absolutely no reasonable person would have ever taken it seriously. And then, in a move that added just profound insult to injury, they offered him a handful of free product coupons as an apology for his quote-unquote confusion. I mean, just imagine that. Imagine assembling nearly $750,000, following a massive company's printed rules to the absolute letter, and being handed a coupon for 2 cases of soda. Pepsi deeply patronized him. I want you to really think about this question for a moment, because it sparked a brutal, years-long war between a lone college student and an absolute army of high-powered corporate attorneys. If a television advertisement makes a clear, highly specific promise, and a consumer fulfills the exact stated terms of that promise, is the corporation legally bound to deliver? Is humor actually a valid legal defense against a breach of contract? Well, John Leonard certainly didn't accept the coupons. Instead, his legal team sent a formal demand for the jet. The lines were permanently drawn. Section 4. The legal battle begins. Knowing a storm was coming, Pepsi filed a preemptive lawsuit in New York, trying to get ahead of it. Meanwhile, Leonard countersued them down in Miami. Ultimately, the tangled cases were consolidated into federal court in Manhattan. And what you're looking at right here is the actual court filing that cemented this unbelievable story into American legal history: Leonard versus PepsiCo Inc. At this point, it totally ceased to be just a funny anecdote you tell at a party. It became a dense, heavily scrutinized legal battle that would hinge on the very foundational principles of contract law itself. This was no longer just about soda. It was about the strict limits of corporate messaging and the entire jurisprudence of modern advertising. The massive burden of deciding this monumental case fell directly onto the shoulders of Judge Kimba M. Wood of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. Judge Wood was tasked with a highly complex, almost surgical duty. She had to completely strip away the pop culture spectacle, the media circus, and the obvious humor of the situation to determine coldly and analytically if Leonard's multi-million-dollar demand held any actual tangible weight under the strict rules of contract formation. She literally had to define exactly where a commercial ends and a binding contract begins. Section 5. The Objective Reason Standard. To make her final ruling, Judge Wood focused heavily on whether the ad was a genuine legal offer or merely an invitation to negotiate. Now, generally speaking, under contract law, advertisements are not considered binding offers. They're usually just seen as invitations for the customer to come in and make an offer to buy something. However, there are very specific exceptions if an ad is incredibly specific and leaves nothing at all open to negotiation. And this brings us to the core legal standard applied in this exact case: objective reasonableness. The law clearly states that corporate secrets or subjective internal intentions just do not matter. It does not matter one bit if Pepsi's marketing executives were sitting in their boardroom joking around. What actually matters is how an average, objective, reasonable person would view the advertisement. So the federal court had to ask a very serious question. Would a reasonable person genuinely believe that a consumer soda company was legitimately offering a $23 to $32 million military-grade aircraft, an aircraft capable of destroying surface-to-air targets, for a mere $700,000, just to be used by a teenager to fly to high school? Judge Wood's final ruling was a pretty brutal reality check for Leonard. She granted summary judgment entirely in favor of Pepsi, stating definitively that absolutely no objective person could reasonably have concluded the commercial was an actual serious offer. In her official dismissal, she actually delivered this incredibly memorable line, noting that the teenager in the ad, quote, could barely be trusted with the keys to his parents' car, much less the prize aircraft of the United States Marine Corps. The extreme hyperbolic humor, the wild absurdity of the high school scene, these were all deemed objective indicators that the ad was mere puffery and definitely not a serious, legally binding contractual commitment. But the judge didn't even stop at the objective reason standard. Even if, hypothetically speaking, the commercial had been construed by the court as a serious offer, Leonard's case faced a secondary, utterly insurmountable formal barrier. A strict legal doctrine known as the Statute of Frauds completely dismantled his entire claim from a purely technical standpoint. You see, under the Uniform Commercial Code, any contract for the sale of goods valued over $500 legally requires a written document, and it must be explicitly signed by the party being sued. In this case, that was Pepsi. Now, Leonard had diligently submitted an order form that he himself signed, but Pepsi had never signed a single piece of paper indicating any actual intent to transfer a Harrier jet to him. A television broadcast, no matter how specific, simply does not satisfy the legal requirement for a written, signed instrument. With cold, deliberate finality, the law permanently closed the door on the transaction. The $500 rule was the absolute final nail in the coffin for John Leonard's jet. Section 6. The legacy of the jet. Even though Leonard's ambitious lawsuit ultimately failed in court, it left deep, permanent scars on the entire advertising industry. It became the ultimate cautionary tale about corporate accountability. Sure, Pepsi had technically won the legal battle, but the multi-year lawsuit cost them incredibly deeply in legal fees, public relations nightmares, and massive losses in consumer trust. Millions of everyday consumers actually sided with the young student who brilliantly outsmarted the system, viewing Pepsi as this arrogant, untouchable giant, simply refusing to honor its own printed rules. Pepsi definitely recognized the massive existential risk they had only narrowly escaped, so they quietly capitulated to the reality of the situation. Following the lawsuit, they totally pulled the commercial off the air and actually altered the on-screen graphic. They increased the required points for the Harrier jet from an attainable 7 million points to an utterly impossible 700 million points. But they didn't just stop there. They added a final, somewhat humiliating addition to the newly revised advertisement. Right beneath the staggering 700 million point price tag, they placed a permanent, explicit, legal disclaimer that simply read, "Just kidding." Those two little words forever changed how massive corporations handle zany, over-the-top marketing. Today, the advertising industry is hyper-cautious. Legal disclaimers are now an absolute standard fixture in any commercial featuring fantastic or exaggerated elements, ensuring that no creative expression can ever be weaponized by a literalist consumer again. I want to leave you with this final, lingering thought. When a massive global corporation makes a multi-million-dollar joke, who really pays the price? John Leonard certainly didn't get his jump jet, but he did fundamentally expose the incredibly precarious balance of power between creative marketing, consumer trust, and the rigid, unbending walls of the law. He forced one of the biggest brands on the planet to actually answer for its hyperbole in federal court. It is a profound reminder that in the wild world of advertising, a promise, even a seemingly impossible one, is only a joke right up until the exact moment someone actually calls your bluff. Thank you for joining us for this explainer.
This is just one story. There are many more you wouldn't believe. Subscribe for the next one.